Coming up on today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, 2 days are officially in the book as far as the Raiders training camp goes. Has there been anything that stood out to me in particular? Well, we'll talk about it plus a whole lot more coming up on Friday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for July 28th, 2023.
Just win. Just win. Just win. Just win.
The autumn wind is a raider, pillaging just for fun. He'll knock you round and upside down and laugh when he's conquered and won. And won. And won. And won. And won.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast to get the latest edition of the show as soon as it becomes available. Of course, if you're checking us out on YouTube, thank you. We appreciate you. We appreciate my man Ari. And speaking of my man Ari, he was doing a hell of a job trying to get the show up on YouTube on Thursday. Had a little bit of technical difficulties. If you checked us out on YouTube on Thursday, you know what I'm talking about. We had a little bit of a snafu. And when I say we, I really mean me. I don't really know how I did it, to be 100% honest with you. Somehow, I found a way to mute my microphone, but only in segment number 3. Like, I really don't know how I did that. Like, what button did I press? And I don't know. You know, my mom always tells me, just keep on getting old. Keep on living. Keep on getting old. You'll see what I'm talking about at some point. Maybe that's what it was. Maybe it's the fact that training camp, that sun kicked my backside, and I'm not in midseason form yet. I don't know. But somehow, some way, I found a way to mute my microphone in segment number 3. So Ari was scrambling. He was trying to do everything he could. He was calling me panicking, saying, Q, I don't know what to do. And I was like, man, look, it's my mistake. Just do the best you can and don't worry about it. So he did, and he does a great job each and every day. You can check him out on Twitter, at Ari Produces. You can always hit me up on Twitter. Don't tell me I messed up, please. I already know. At your boy Q254. And, of course, the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line is 707-654-4693. We'll have calls and texts coming up in segment number 3. Segment number 2, I jumped on ESPN Radio National with Shea Cornett and Harry Douglas, longtime NFL wide receiver. They're doing NFL training camp two-a-days, and so they were talking about the Raiders. So they gave me a call and wanted to talk about it. So we talked all things Jimmy G, talked about Josh Jacobs, talked about the Raiders defense, just talked about a lot of things with Josh McDaniels and company. You'll hear that conversation coming up in segment number 2, kind of giving you a preview of the first couple days of what I've seen from training camp. Of course, today is going to be day 3. We'll also have training camp on Saturday. They're off on Sunday, and then we'll be back at it next week. And I believe the pads come on next week. I know some people have been saying the pads are going to be on Saturday. Maybe they will. I think, though, it's going to be next week. So we'll see what that happens. But day 3 of training camp will be today. Here in segment number 1, I want to go ahead and give you a little bit of news and notes, everything that came out of day 2 of Raiders training camp. Off top, guys that did not participate, running back Josh Jacobs. We all know why. He doesn't have a contract, hasn't signed the franchise tag. He's not in town. As far as injuries, Tyree Wilson still on the NFI list. Byron Young still on the PUP list. Neil Farrell Jr. still on the NFI list. And Nate Hobbs still dealing with the eye injury. He took the softball off the face last Saturday at the Vegas Golden Knights and Raiders Battle for Vegas charity softball game. And you want to talk about a guy that if it wasn't for bad luck, you would have no luck, right? Nate Hobbs. Guy looks like he's in pretty good shape. Mandatory minicamp looked like he was fresh, ready to roll. You know, just got a lot to prove after being injured quite a bit his second year in the league. And all of a sudden he takes takes a softball off the eye. And he's not able to participate at the beginning of training camp. And I do think he's missing valuable training camp. Not that I think that he's going to lose a roster spot, but I think that secondary is going to be very competitive. So if he wants to hold down a starting role, he's going to need to be out there competing, because right now guys like Jacorian Bennett are getting a lot of reps. Guys like Duke Shelley are getting a lot of reps. Brandon Faison getting a lot of reps. David Long, guys like that all getting a lot of reps because, well, Nate Hobbs isn't in there to go get his reps. Again, it's early in training camp, so if he gets back sooner rather than later, I think he'll be fine. But the longer he's out, the more of a chance and the more of a door he's opening up for someone else. Another guy I think that it's really important for training camp is Trayvon Merrick. Both of those guys, Nate Hobbs and Trayvon Merrick, both going into the 3rd year in the NFL. And for Trayvon, I think he's got more to prove in training camp. I really do. I think he's got to have a big training camp and a big preseason just to prove his value. I don't really, gut feeling tells me that he's going to be there. I don't think he's going to get released, but I also know that Dave Ziegler did not draft him. So if they moved on from him, they can say, hey, that was the other guy's mistake, not ours. And there's nothing that, anyone can say about that. They can say, okay, well, I guess, right? But it's just one of those scenarios that he took a step back his second year, and he's got to prove that he understands the scheme and he could be an asset on this Raiders defense. So both Nate Hobbs and Trayvon Merrick, I think, have a lot to do this training camp and preseason, but Trayvon Merrick, I feel, has a little bit more. A couple roster moves that were made as of Thursday. The Raiders tweeted out that they signed cornerback Isaiah Brown, and in a corresponding move, they waived injured cornerback Jordan Perryman. And if you remember, Isaiah Brown was actually released or waived just the other day, and, he ended up coming back because now Jordan Perryman is injured, so they bring Isaiah Brown back. So just some minor little moves right there, but it's moves that were made. I mentioned Josh Jacobs not being out there. Mike Garafolo from NFL Network actually put out a tweet and put out a report on Thursday that the Raiders made a $12 million a year offer to running back Josh Jacobs, and that's the offer that he turned down. And Garafolo goes on to say that if Saquon Barkley had been offered that same $12 million deal by the Giants that Josh Jacobs received from the Raiders, that Barkley would have taken it. Obviously, Barkley eventually ended up taking a one-year, $11 million deal, which is tied to incentives. And the thing about it, from people that know a lot more about the situation than I do, it has nothing to do with the average salary. It had to do with the guaranteed money when it comes to Josh Jacobs and why he turned down the offer from the Silver and Black. The other part of this, I hope that report is not from Barkley saying he would have taken what Josh Jacobs was offered. Like, I hope that that's not what Barkley said. It was already kind of funny style that, Barkley's part of this running back Zoom call, and, he's talking about sitting out. Then all of a sudden he gets a $900,000 raise and little $900,000 added to his franchise tag. He's like, yep, I'll sign. I'll be the first one at camp. Right? It was already a little funny style. I'm hoping that he wasn't the one saying, oh, if they had offered me $12 million a year, I would have definitely taken that. I'm hoping that is one of those like speculations by Mike Garafolo, but I know that he is, very well connected there at the NFL Network and knows a lot of people within many organizations. So, like I said, hopefully that's not Saquon saying that, but, we will see, I guess, sooner rather than later. Maybe the information will come out and, maybe sometime at some point the details of what the Raiders actually offered as far as guaranteed money will come out as well, because apparently they offered $12 million for a average salary or, a yearly salary, the base salary, but the guaranteed money is what Josh Jacobs did not like. Final little nugget I have for you for segment number 1 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast news and notes of the day has to do with Tom Brady. And I'm sure you're thinking, like, why Tom Brady, Q? What are you talking about? Well, this comes from Mike Florio from Pro Football Talk. Of course, he does a really good job there putting out all the information. Of course, he's lawyer by trade, so he gets a lot of detailed information that some people may not get, and he goes looking for these details that some people may not look for. So this has to do with Brady and the fact that he might not end up becoming a minority owner of the Raiders after all. And this is what he had to say. The NFL's recent decision to block the distribution of equity to players and other employees has one specific impact on a former, for now, player who is or perhaps was poised to become an owner. Per a source with knowledge of the situation, the new no equity rule complicates Tom Brady's effort to acquire a portion of the Raiders. During last week's special meeting to approve the sale of the Commanders from Daniel Snyder to Josh Harris, Raiders owner Mark Davis spoke passionately against the proposed rule, explaining that he had planned to employ Brady as part of the deal for Brady to buy a piece of the team. The rule passed over Davis's concern. Now that Davis won't be able to both employ Brady and to sell to Brady equity of the team, that could set the transaction back to square one, and it could potentially derail it altogether. So, not really sure. I find this interesting because I'm not really sure what Mark Davis was going to, or how he was going to employ Tom Brady. Everything that we heard when all this started to, come about and that he was going to be a minority owner was the fact that he was going to have nothing to do with any kind of football operations, had no kind of say-so. He was just going to be a minority owner, like a lot of different celebrities are minority owner of teams, and that was going to be that. Just like he is with the Las Vegas Aces, also owned by Mark Davis. But I find it interesting that Mark Davis was very adamant and passionate, in the words of Mike Florio, against the proposed rule because he wanted to employ Tom Brady. So I'm very curious, and at some point, hopefully we'll find out. I'm very curious on what exactly role he planned on putting Tom Brady in, how he was going to employ him in the organization and at the same time sell him a portion, a minority share of the silver and black. But that's all I got for you as far as news and notes. A little interesting nugget to close out segment number 1 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Coming up in segment number 2, NFL training camp two-a-days. What does that mean? Well, something that ESPN National Radio has been doing, and they gave me a call. They gave me a call on Thursday to talk all things silver and black. Shea Cornette and longtime NFL wide receiver Harry Douglas had me on the show to talk about Jimmy G, to talk about Josh Jacobs, to talk about Josh McDaniels and the Raiders defense. All that's coming up in segment number 2 after I tell you about our partners at eBay Motors and the fact that they've teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Football host Vinny Iyer to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week all season long. Whether you're prepping for a draft or scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide you players that are guaranteed to fit on your roster. So, with prep underway for the upcoming season, let's see who Vinny's picked out for us on this week's eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. How about we take a look at Justin Fields? He says, when the top tier of quarterbacks is off the board in fantasy football drafts in 2023, there's another line of luxury passers and runners who are guaranteed to fit your starting lineups every week. One of them is the Bears' Justin Fields, who started rolling out of the garage last season and is bound to jump into the fast lane this season. This time, on top of his huge rushing total, Fields can deliver improved stats in the air with DJ Moore now leading Chicago's wide receiving core. Vinny Iyer from Locked On Fantasy Football is going to help you win your fantasy championship, and eBay Motors knows a championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. Same with your vehicle. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, over 122 million parts and accessories for your vehicle right at your fingertips, you can make sure your ride stays running smooth. Air filters, brakes, batteries, taillights, alternators, shocks, and struts. You name it, eBay Motors has it. And they'll make sure it's the right fit for your car. eBay Guaranteed Fit helps you understand exactly what part you need for your vehicle the first time. So, switch gears, crank the AC, say goodbye to sweating if your ride needs a little fixing up, because now you know you'll always be set up for success from the get-go. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, everything your vehicle is calling for is just a click away. For the parts and accessories that fit your vehicle, just look for the green check. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices at ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. You know I'm not talking about Russell Wilson. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. I want you to hear the conversation I had on ESPN Radio on Thursday with Shea Cornette and longtime NFL wide receiver Harry Douglas, called NFL Training Camp 2-A-Days, talking all things Raiders. Paul Gutierrez, you'll actually hear him lead it off. Then you'll hear Shea Cornette and Harry Douglas bring me in, and we'll talk about day 2 of training camp and just, Raider storylines in training camp. So a couple little nuggets before I get into that. Jimmy G, getting a little bit more comfortable in the system. You can obviously see that he's familiar with it. Again, it's nothing overwhelming. It's just a couple days, but you can see he's comfortable, and he's comfortable with getting the ball out pretty quickly. Also, it was reported that Sam Webb had an interception, the first interception of Raiders training camp, but I didn't see it. I was out there and I didn't see it. Levi Edwards from Raiders.com, he actually tweeted that out. I asked him in the media room who threw it, and he wasn't 100% sure. He thinks it was Aiden O'Connell, but he said it was on the far field, the very far field, so he just happened to look up and see it. So, I mean, it is what it is. I asked Vic Taver, he didn't see it. I asked Vinny Bonsignore, he didn't see it. Nobody else saw the interception but Levi, so I'll just leave it at that. But that was being reported. And also the team just kind of looks like they're moving around quicker than they were last year. I mentioned that on Thursday's show. It just kind of looks like they have a better understanding of what they're doing, even though there's still a lot of new parts, a lot of new players. But it just seems like everybody's kind of going at a little bit quicker pace, and they're a little bit more advanced than they were a year ago. So those are just a couple little nuggets from day 2 of Raiders training camp. Now it's time to get into NFL training camp 2-A-Days. This was part of the conversation I had with Shea Cornette and Harry Douglas, longtime NFL wide receiver on ESPN Radio.
Hey, let's go do our job, man.
NFL Nation 2-A-Days.
Time is here.
On ESPN Radio. The Las Vegas Raiders.
58, go.
This is Raiders reporter Paul Gutierrez, and the biggest storyline for Las Vegas wonders if Jimmy Garoppolo is an upgraded quarterback over Derek Carr. The Raiders believe so. Otherwise, they would not have cut a 9-year starter and signed the oft-injured Garoppolo. The thinking is a healthy Garoppolo is indeed an upgrade in this offensive system, and his familiarity with Coach Josh McDaniels' scheme from their time together in New England. Granted, they were last together in 2017, but using Jarrett Stidham as an example, Stidham looked more comfortable in his 2 starts to end last season than Carr did in 15 games. Remember, McDaniels' scheme was the only one Stidham had known since entering the NFL in 2019. If familiarity breeds contempt, the Raiders hope it also brings success.
Countdown to kickoff with NFL Nation 2-A-Days on ESPN Radio.
Continuing with 2-A-Days here on ESPN Radio as we move to the Raiders, as we just heard. This is ESPN Radio. Shea Cornette, Harry Douglas here with you, and we're joined now by Q Myers. You can hear him as the host of Raiders Nation Radio. And so thanks for being with us, Q. And so let's hear how things are going there, because, of course, the big question has to do with the quarterback position and Jimmy Garoppolo. And, he had off-season surgery. I mean, he's a full go, it sounds like. There's no restriction. So how would you describe the start of the Jimmy G era there in Vegas?
Well, it kind of goes, as expected, right? I mean, he's a guy that looks very familiar and very comfortable in Josh McDaniels' scheme. He's a guy that the big question is what you mentioned. Is he going to be there for the start of training camp because of that foot surgery that he had? But once he was cleared on Sunday, he was a good go to start on Wednesday for training camp. We just got wrapped up with training camp today. He was looking good today. And the one thing that the Raiders are doing that I think is smart in this situation, and Harry could, kind of attest to this if this is something that he's seen and thinks is a smart idea as well, they're getting all the quarterbacks reps with the ones. Like Devontae is getting passes from Brian Hoyer and also Aiden O'Connell. So it's not like Jimmy G's just throwing with the ones and Aiden O'Connell's just throwing with the threes. They're kind of getting everybody with familiar right now because they can. It's early in training camp, and it's kind of letting these wide receivers get the feel from different quarterbacks, what the ball looks like coming out, what the cadence sounds like. And it's really kind of a quick-paced camp to start. It's only 2 days in, so won't overreact to anything I'm seeing. But it looks like that they're feeling comfortable in what they're doing so far in year 2 with Josh McDaniels.
So, Q, how will this offense look differently with Jimmy Garoppolo at the quarterback position versus Derek Carr?
Well, I think it's just a lot of the ball getting out of Jimmy's hands really quickly. I mean, Jimmy's not a guy that you're going to see him stretching the field a lot. I mean, he's taken a couple shots so far in camp, early in camp, but he looks very comfortable with getting that ball, taking that step, and boom, right, it comes out, whether it's to Devontae or Jacoby Myers or Hunter Renfrow. He looks very comfortable in that role, and he surveys the field really quickly and then gets it out. And I think that that's one of the biggest things. Let the wide receivers, let the backs out of the backfield, let them go ahead and get the yards after the catch. So I just really think that with the familiarity, with the understanding of what Josh wants, he's going to be able to implement that. And, of course, he hasn't been in the system for a handful of years, so he still is trying to get comfortable. But you can see glimpses here and there. There's every once in a while you'll see that, Jimmy or why Jimmy throw that we've heard about it quite a bit when he was in San Francisco. He'll do that every once in a while. But so far, there's been some pretty decent throws from Jimmy.
All right, that's good news then, of course, if you're a Raiders fan. We're talking to Q Myers right now, host of Raider Nation Radio, joining us here on ESPN Radio. Shea Cornette, Harry Douglas here with you. And so the big question mark is what is going on with Josh Jacobs. Obviously, Saquon Barkley signed his deal, and so that drama is over there with the Giants. He was able to attend training camp. And so the last really holdout with the running back position that we're all focused on is Josh Jacobs. What's the latest you're hearing, or what do you know, Q?
Well, I just think that they're waiting, just waiting for Josh. They talked about him, and he's been talked about quite a bit the first 2 days of training camp from either head coach Josh McDaniels or different players on the team, and they all respect what he has to do for himself on the business side of things. And so they're just kind of waiting. They're not talking like Jim Irsay is talking in Indianapolis on Twitter about, running backs and their lack of respect when it comes to getting paid. They're just waiting for him to do what he does. And I honestly, and this is just a gut feeling, I think that what's ultimately going to happen is similar to what happened with Saquon Barkley. They put a little sugar on top of that franchise tag. He comes in and plays. I don't see a situation where he leaves $10 million on the table. It doesn't make any sense. It hasn't proven to make any sense so far, what we've seen throughout the history of the NFL. I mean, you're losing a year and you're losing a lot of money. So I don't know what it will mean for the long term, but, I think that that's what happens with Josh Jacobs. In the meantime, they have a plethora of running backs that they're out, they have out there working right now. And the guys, Zamir White, a former 4th-round pick out of Georgia, he's a guy that's getting a lot of burn right now. Sincere McCormick is a name that I'd like to pay attention to, and I'm going to pay attention to. Out of UTSA, they put him on IR last year in May. And I felt like when they did that, they put him on IR for a reason. I felt like they stashed him for a reason, and now you see him out there getting some burns. So they have plenty of running backs that are working while Josh Jacobs is training, by himself and figuring out what he's going to do with the contract situation. I think it gets taken care of sometime, a week or 2 weeks before the first week of the season against Denver when they take off and have that road trip against Denver. But, only time will tell.
They bought in on the defensive side 3 people who I think are going to be key pieces for the Raiders in this defense in 2023. And, Marcus Peters, they just signed him at the cornerback position. Marcus Epps, we all know what he meant to the Philadelphia Eagles at the safety position, but also their first-round draft pick in Tyree Wilson. You add those guys to Max Crosby and Chandler Jones, in which I think they're hoping he has a better year from start to finish. What improvements will we see from the defense this year?
Well, I'll tell you, it's something, Harry, that I've been very emphatic about. I've been trying to emphasize on my local radio show that they need to get a lot better in creating turnovers. It's just that simple, right? 6 interceptions in 2022 is not going to cut it. Marcus Peters is a guy that, if you average out what he's done throughout the course of his career, he has 32 career interceptions, right? That's 26 more than the Raiders as a team had last season, right? They only had 6. That's not going to cut in. So one of the big emphasis that Coach McDaniels and even Coach Graham, we just talked to them a little while ago, was talking about was affecting the quarterback and affecting the ball. Hits, pressures, sacks, right? Turnovers, knocking the ball down, PBUs, pass breakups. That all has to improve. And that's where a guy like Marcus Epps, who had the majority of the snaps defensively for the Eagles last year, where he steps up. Marcus Peters, ball hawk by nature, right? I mean, he's going to be that guy that's going to go out there and look for the ball. And that's just what they have to do. And Harry, they've had in 2 days in a row, their linebacker, Devon Diablo, who a lot of people have high expectations for, has had an opportunity to get a turnover, create a turnover. He's had his hands on the ball twice, and both times it fell to the ground. So that's stuff that, again, only 2 days in the training camp, they've got to work on that. They've got to secure that ball and take it the other way.
Well, that's important because those type of plays when you can intercept that football and then the offense goes down and scores a touchdown because you miss a chance to get a turnover, those are the types that really hurt you in football games too.
Yeah, don't want to.
Yeah, there's no doubt, and that's something that has hurt them for years. Not only last year, but for years, and that's got to get cleaned up first and foremost.
No doubt, because the Raiders start 3 of their first 4 games of the season on the road against pretty prolific offenses, so they better figure that out early on. All right, Q, thanks so much for the insight. We really appreciate it.
So there you go. There was the conversation right there. You heard what Paul had to say. You heard what I had to say. And, of course, Harry Douglas and Shea Cornette as well. I thought that was interesting, little NFL training camp 2-a-days. And I really felt like that kind of helped summarize day 2 of training camp as opposed to just kind of listing everything that I saw or what I thought was going on. I thought that was a really good way to summarize it. So hopefully you thought the same thing. Hopefully you enjoyed that conversation. Coming up in segment number 3, your calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. That's next here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's start things off with Raider Eddie in Denver. He's calling to talk about or ask about first-round pick Tyree Wilson. Here he is, Raider Eddie in Denver.
Hey, Q, what's up? This is Raider Eddie in Denver. Love your show as always. I want to ask you about Tyree Wilson, and I want to ask you, do you know anything about, number one, how many teams might have taken him off their board because of the injury concern? And number two, do you know anything about the surgery, the typical timeline for return? Because I'm not really buying this. We're going to bring him along slowly. This is in the best interest of the player. What I believe is in the best interest of the player is the surgery was successful. He's back to 100% now, so he's able to participate in camp because getting the most live reps as a football player on the field is going to prepare his body the best way for the season, which starts August 10th, the regular season. So I'm not quite buying this. We're taking him along slowly, but what else can they say? So I want to ask you about those two things, if you have any insight or even just thoughts about those two things. I really believe Tyree Wilson could be a game changer for the Raiders. The Raiders have told us and shown us that they believe the edge opposite Max, the critical position. That's why they went after Chandler, didn't quite work out. And now they've gone after Wilson with their number 4 overall pick. And I happen to believe that Wilson, if he turns into a difference maker, to whatever degree he turns into a difference maker, I really think that will determine what our defense can actually be. And I think it'll have a huge impact on our season going forward. So I think it's critical. If Tyree Wilson can't play and he's a flop, I think it's going to make this regime appear to a lot of fans to really not maybe have a real plan or maybe not know exactly what they're doing. Fair or unfair, that's just kind of my take on it. Q, love the show, love hearing from the nation, and have a great one.
Thank you so much for the call, my man. And look, it was never explained 100% what the foot injury was for Tyree Wilson. A lot of people said it was a Linz-Frank injury. It was never confirmed to be a Linz-Frank injury. So I'm not 100% sure. I would think that the time that he's been off since being at Texas Tech and where he is right now, he'd be ready to go. But they said that they're taking it slow with them. It's about the long term, not the short term. So the thing that concerns me with this whole situation is that he's a big man with a foot injury. So I'm kind of with the take it slow approach. If that's in fact what it is, I really would rather them take it slow, make sure they get it right, make sure that he's 100% healthy. You don't want to see him go out there and work and then all of a sudden hurt himself again, or he's not 100% back, and then all of a sudden it's a setback. Like, you want him to be a full go when he's a full go and hope that he doesn't have to ever worry about revisiting the foot injury. But again, he's a big man with a foot injury. So that's the one thing that I would say is a little bit scary. But I think that they're being pretty open and honest about the situation. So far, that's what they've proven to do. When they said that they were not, didn't have any anxiety about Jimmy G, they didn't. Jimmy G was there first day of training camp, right? So I kind of feel like what they're saying about the injury, they're comfortable with. Just like when they drafted Tyree Wilson, they said, hey, we feel very comfortable with where he's at and where he's going to be, and so that's why we felt comfortable with drafting him. So until they've been proven wrong, I'm just going to have to go ahead and roll with it. Hey, again, maybe I'm just looking through silver and black glasses, or maybe I'm just giving them the benefit of the doubt. I like to tend to think I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt, but we'll see. But thank you so much for that, Raider Eddie. I do appreciate you, and I want to see him out there, because I do think Duke could be a really big force when out there and healthy. So hopefully it's sooner rather than later. Up next, got a text from M from Marks on Raider. He says, hey, Q, it's M, and I know you can feel it just the way I am. They're on the field and putting in work because the 2023 season's here, the most hopeful time of the year. Looks like Jimmy G got there. Let's just hope that Josh Jacobs thing pans out and that Tyree Wilson can get on the field sooner rather than later. Let's get this cemetery together and get this thing rolling in the right direction. Hope springs eternal this time of year. Thanks for all you do. Just win, baby. That's M from Marks on Raider. And yeah, I don't know what kind of wordplay that was. I really don't. But I could clearly see that there was some wordplay going into that text. But I get it. I get the excitement. I get the gist of it. The excitement is it's time for football. Training camp is here, which is leading up to, preseason, which will lead up to the regular season. So there you go. Get the ball rolling. I'm with you 100%. Again, not too 100% sure on the wordplay, but boom, it is what it is. I'm good. Jimmy G is there. Tyree Wilson hopefully is there, and hopefully Josh Jacobs is there sooner rather than later, which I do believe he will be. So thanks again, my man. I appreciate the text. Up next, got a call from Jordan in Oregon. He's calling to talk about the Raiders and who are their dogs. Also wants to talk about Jimmy G and how he thinks Josh McDaniels' offense will help him as opposed to Kyle Shanahan's offense in San Francisco. Here he is, Jordan in Oregon.
What's going on, Q? Jordan from Oregon. I wanted to call in and kind of chime in. And honestly, this time of year reminds me of a call you had couple years ago from one of your callers, and I think it was Most Known Unknown, to be honest. And it was talking about how some of these teams that actually do hoist the Lombardi, how they're usually not stacked with let's say 20 dogs on the team, 20 All Pros, 20 Pro Bowlers, however you want to put it. Usually it's like 7 or 8. And I always reflect back to that call this time of year, because you start seeing the team come together, and you start seeing, like, Q, as you know, your term you basically have highlighted on the whole entire time you've had this podcast is a dog, is a player that's just a dog. And I know what you've always meant by that. It's a difference maker. It's a guy who's got that swagger, and a guy who can lead this team and take them over the hump. And that's what I just want to try to identify with this team over training camp. And I think right now, it's a little early to say, but I think that'd be a good question to ask as we head into some of the preseason games, maybe, Q, is which Raiders can you identify that are dogs? And, to be competitive, we're going to need 7 or 8 of them. And that's going to need to be broken up on each side of the ball pretty good. And I think we're close. But a second thing I wanted to bring up, Q, is the G situation. I think Raider Nation, including myself, including, some of you talk on your radio show, there's always that, the season could go this way if Jimmy stays healthy. The season could go this way if Jimmy plays all 17 games. And, it really got me thinking, those are super, super true points, but it's also, we haven't seen Jimmy operate in this offense. I know for a fact this offense that he's going to be in is going to put him in less risky situations than Kyle Shanahan's offense. And part of that, Q, I wish you could highlight on this, and maybe you've got a better understanding of this, but that Shanahan offense requires a lot more movement, and it requires a lot more play action and getting your quarterback put in a spot where you turn your back to the line, or you put your quarterback in a situation where you do have to roll out, create time to make these plays work. And where the Raiders offense, if it's going to be designed with what they did with Brady, is more of a dink and dunk, which people hate to hear, but it is. It really is. It's more of a get rid of the ball within 2 seconds, find the most efficient route, locate it, get rid of the ball. And I just want your take on that, Q, because maybe this whole idea of Jimmy just, oh man, he's literally glass, isn't necessarily true in this offense. Peace out.
Thank you so much for the call, my man. I appreciate you. And as far as the dogs, Max Crosby, it's a no-brainer. Devontae Adams, no-brainer. Marcus Peters, no doubt. Outside of that, I have no idea. Right? You're talking about 6 or 7 dogs. I got 3. Josh Jacobs I'd put there, but he's not there. So I got 3 right now. Right? I know Max Crosby said that Jimmy G is a dog. I have to see that before I believe it. Right? I mean, it's easy to say, oh, that guy's a dog. That guy's a dog. That guy's a dog. But I'm talking about dogs. I'm talking about true alphas. I see 3 right now on the field when I'm out at the practice facility. I see Max, no-brainer. Devontae, no-brainer. And Marcus Peters, there's no doubt about it. Right? Those 3 guys are who I have penciled as dogs as of right now. As far as, Jimmy G and the McDaniels offense, you heard me in segment number 2 talk about getting the ball out of his hands real quick. That's just what I believe we're going to see. I've seen him take a couple deep shots. The ball comes out okay at times, but he's not the guy that's going to be taking a bunch of deep shots. That's not what you want him to do. I believe Jimmy's going to snap the ball, step, pat, pat, boom, ball out. Snap, pat, ball out. Snap, pat, ball out. That's what I think it's going to be. It's going to be real quick, fast, and hurry. You mentioned the kind of dink and dunk, and I know nobody likes that, but if it's effective, it's effective. It's simple as that, and I can see Jimmy G doing that. Now, the one thing I'll say is that if you want to talk about a guy that has just a strong arm that can get the ball down the field, Aiden O'Connell. Brian Hoyer kind of labors to get the ball down the field. He did throw a pretty nice deep ball to Hunter Renfrow, but the play would have been dead. And I know Vic Tafur tweeted out that Brian Hoyer escaped the pocket. He escaped the pocket after like 10 seconds. He would have definitely been sacked or the ball would have been thrown away, but of course they're not going to touch the quarterback in training camp. But he did step up in the pocket and he chucked it down the field. It was a really nice catch by Hunter Renfrow, but please believe that play. That's why I didn't really talk about it. That play would have been a done deal. There was no chance. But he struggles to get the ball down the field, but Aiden O'Connell doesn't. I'll tell you that. He's got a really strong arm, so there's that. But, again, only seen a couple days of practice, no pads, no joint practice, no any of that, just a couple days of pitch and catch around the yard. So thank you so much for that call, Jordan. I do appreciate you. Up next, and I just got time for a couple more, a text from Michael in Buffalo. He says, hey, Q, Michael from Buffalo here. I was a teenager when Rich Gannon was signed, and there was very little coverage of the Raiders in my neck of the woods, and the internet was in its infancy back then, so not like it was today in expanding your news sources. I know you're not much older than me, but wasn't the signing of Gannon met with lots of questions and disbelief about his ability to succeed? It's super early to compare Gannon to Jimmy G, but the similarities are intriguing. That's from Michael in Buffalo, and thanks so much. And, the thing about it, for me, Michael, I understand what you're saying because, there's a lot of people that have said Jimmy G has a lot of questions just like Rich Gannon did when Gannon joined the Silver and Black. One thing about Gannon, man, I always liked him when he was a Chief, and I never understood why they put Elvis Gerback in there. Whenever Gannon was in there, I felt like he always was beating the Raiders. I always thought that he had an ability, and I think it's because he was able to use his legs as well. He always had an ability to beat the Raiders, and I always said, man, that guy, he's pretty good. And then when they would bench him and have Elvis Gerback be the guy, and then when Elvis was injured, Rich Gannon would go back in. I kept saying, like, why is that? I don't understand that. So when the Raiders actually signed Rich Gannon, I was kind of excited because, well, at least he couldn't beat the Raiders anymore, and then he ended up turning out to be really good. I didn't know he was going to be that good, but he ended up being pretty good. So for me, Rich Gannon was never a question, but I understand exactly where you're coming from. We'll see how it plays out with Jimmy Garoppolo. Final call for the day, final call for the show, final call for the week. JP in the 209. He's calling to talk about quarterback Aiden O'Connell and also talking about that embarrassing moment for the Raiders defense in 2022. Here he is, JP in the 209.
Yo, what's up, Q? It's your boy JP from the 209. Just wanted to call in and kind of, after hearing your podcast and taking in the feedback of what you kind of saw of that during training camp, and also just kind of what I've been seeing over the past couple of days. And I've been watching a lot of Aiden O'Connell college tape, man, and dude, I don't know. I think we got a gem for some reason. Something just tells me this guy is special. Like, I don't know. I don't know. I really got a lot of faith in this guy. I don't have a lot of faith in them yet, but I think we got something special with that guy. But also, I just wanted to also respond to the guy who called in saying what the Raiders defense they should be pissed off or embarrassed about. Damn, that ring around the rosy around the Chiefs when the Chiefs did that to us, that was embarrassing. We need payback for that one. But that's all I got to say.
JP, thanks for the call, my man. I appreciate you. And, again, not going to overreact one way or the other, but I do know that McDaniels is high on Aiden O'Connell. I remember Josh McDaniels mentioning Aiden O'Connell when we were in Phoenix at the owners' meetings. He was one of the quarterbacks that he rattled off when he was talking about him. He throws a nice ball. He has a strong arm. Paul Gutierrez from ESPN, he actually described him to me when we were talking on Thursday as a taller, bigger Mac Jones. And we all know how Josh McDaniels feels about Mac Jones. Now, again, that doesn't mean he's a quarterback of the future. That doesn't mean anything. You ask one person that's out there at the practice facility, they'll say, man, that guy's great. He's got a chance to be something. And you ask another person that covers the Raiders, they'll say, oh, he stinks. Same day, guys standing shoulder to shoulder and two different conversations. So, again, it's early in camp. We'll see what happens during the joint practices. With the Niners and Rams, I want to see what he's able to do then when he's going up against an NFL defense that's looking to take advantage of a rookie. That'll be interesting to see what he brings to the table. So my expectations for Aiden O'Connell are still where they were when the Raiders drafted him. Now, he'll probably be a really good backup. But I do know for a fact he's got a strong arm. I know he throws a pretty nice-looking ball, and that Josh McDaniels likes him a lot. So take that for what it's worth, I guess. But that's all I got for you on today's show. Of course, depending on what time you're listening to this, we'll be back at the Intermountain Healthcare Performance Center this morning. 8:30 is when we can start checking out practice. So if you follow me on Twitter at your boy Q254, I'll definitely tweet out a few videos of what I'm seeing. And, yes, the videos pretty much look the same each and every day because we have a small window when we can film and take pictures and tweet stuff out. Then we have to basically shut it on down until after practice is over. But 8:30 is when it starts. About 10:15, it'll get wrapped up for us. We'll go to the media room and talk to some players and coaches. And so whatever I get, I'll bring it to the table and bring it to the table on Monday. Of course, we'll practice we won't practice, but we'll be at practice on Saturday as well. So we'll have a lot to go over on Monday's show. So Raider Nation, have a fantastic weekend. Again, follow me on Twitter at your boy Q254. I'll tweet out as much information as possible. And like I said, have a good weekend. Be back with us here on the Locked On Raiders podcast on Monday. Until then, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Until then, just win, baby.